Thank you, Jose, for having me here to share this presentation about food temperature assessment during exercise. And following the words of Professor Carpes from Felipe, I also learned everything I know about infrared thermography from Jose, so probably we should also thank him for this presentation. As I told you before, I'm going to talk to you about food temperature assessment during exercise, and during this presentation, I will address different aspects related to how we can analyze food temperature, mainly using infrared thermography. In addition, we will look at the results of some studies that have been conducted in this area, and I will discuss some perspectives, some future perspectives in the analysis of food temperature. To begin with, it's important to briefly understand the characteristics of the food, as it has highly distinctive anatomy and physiology, and this will directly influence the thermal behavior of this region. The foot is the most distal region of the body, and it acts as a support and a structural platform for our entire body, bearing with substantial loads during human locomotion. It is composed by 28 bones, which is approximately 30% of the total mass of the foot, and it also has some structures that helps support all this body weight, such as the hallux, which has limited mobility but provides important structural stability to all of our body. It is also important to consider the different muscle groups involved in the foot movement. On the one hand, we have the extrinsic muscles, which are located in the leg, in the lower leg, and are responsible for the great movements of the foot and the ankle, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, inversion, eversion. And we have other intrinsic muscles, which are inside the foot and are responsible for more precise movements, such as flexion and extension of the toes. Another important aspect is the blood flow inside this region. Blood flow here is rarely constant. There are a lot of thermal changes affected by many cutaneous veins in the foot. Under normal conditions, these veins are in vasoconstrictions, meaning that there is usually limited venous flow accumulation in this region. When we are in high temperature conditions, in the plantar regions, it occurs a passive dilatation, but in the dorsal part of the foot, it occurs an active vasodilation mechanisms. As a result of this, both blood flow and perspiration increasing, and these are the essential mechanisms for heat dissipation. In relation with perspiration, of course, this is the main mechanism for heat dissipation in the foot, because in the foot we have a high density of sweat glands, mainly located in the plantar surface of the foot. Approximately 80% of the glands are located in the sole of the foot. So overall, the foot play a fundamental role in human thermoregulation, acting as thermal radiators. Therefore, it's very important to understand the effect of both footwear and exercise in order to prevent injuries and optimize athletic performance while we are performing some physical activity. Due to this vascular variability and the large number of sweat glands that we have in the foot, temperature measurement should be carried out under strict methodological conditions to avoid errors in interpretation of the results. From a methodological perspective, several key factors must be controlled to ensure the reliability of the measurements, and now I will focus in the most important ones. We all know that infrared thermography is widely used because it's a non-invasive, contact-free, objective technique to provide quantitative data of the temperature of different regions of the body. In the case of the foot, it allows us to know what is happening not only in a specific area of the foot, but also in the whole region, as Felipe and also Barlo told us before. But as Felipe said, it's also important to understand the main limitations that we have in the regions we are measuring. In the case of the feet, while we are performing physical exercise, normally we are not able to measure this region because it is covered with footwear and with socks with different layers. So we only can measure before or after performing this physical exercise. In addition, we have different layers covering our foot and creating a microclimate inside the footwear, which can make the interpretation of the results more complex, both in clinical and sport context. Moreover, there are multiple factors that can affect skin temperature of these regions, and this variability on the blood flow, this large amount of sweat glands produce a low reproducibility in the assessment of the temperature of this region. So it's important to be aware of what do we need to do to perform a good assessment methodologically in methodological aspects. The first part is the participant preparations. Participants should remain seated for approximately 10 minutes with their feet uncovered and their legs extended, as you can see in the picture. When capturing the images, we use an anti-reflective panel placed behind the feet, as you can see. We have here two different setups, one with a black cardboard with two holes where the participant inserted his feet. And in the second one, the participant is lying down, but we also use a black cloth to better isolate the area around the legs. In some occasions, in some conditions, 10 minutes may not be enough to establish a stable baseline of the temperature. For example, if there is a large difference between outdoor temperature and the temperature in the room, a longer acclimatization period, up to 15 minutes, may be required. And we also noticed that after an intense running of 30 minutes, the baseline temperature may not be restored after 10 minutes. So if our participants come by walking or running to our lab, probably we will need more than 10 minutes to make their temperature of the foot stable before measuring them. Another important factor is the camera selection, the camera use. Here you can see an example of the same feet captured with 3 different cameras of different resolutions from the same position. And what we found in this project was that the higher resolution cameras required more time for manual image analysis than the lower resolution cameras, but these lower resolution cameras overestimate the temperature of the feeds. Nevertheless, no major within subject differences were observed when the same camera were used consistently. So we recommend using higher resolution cameras whenever possible, as they allow a more precise definition of the regions of interest. But if it's not possible, the most important recommendation is to use the same camera throughout the study rather than switching between different models or device to avoid this overestimation of the temperature. Regarding the definition or determination of the regions of interest, there are currently not specific standards recommendations. Instead, each study defines these regions according to its own objectives. For this reason, the key point is to clearly describe how the regions have been defined and delimited in order to ensure the reproducibility of the study in the future. Finally, the type of analysis is also important. We have two main options here, the automatic or the manual analysis. In this study that we perform, both methods found similar results with good limits of agreement and strong intra-class correlations values. So you can use both automatic or manual analysis, but as you can see in the examples that we have in the screen, in some food images, errors appeared in the delimitation of the regions of interest when using this automatic analysis. This led to less accurate results in those areas. What happened? For example, the main errors were due to the automatic analysis confuse the leg of the participant with some regions of the food, and also the software struggled a bit to correctly define the hallux or the TUS because the temperature of these regions were too similar to the background, the anti-reflective panel placed behind the feed. So it's important, if you are using this automatic analysis, to scale properly and to avoid to see the leg when you are doing the images. So these are the main methodological aspects to consider when measuring food temperature. However, of course, it's important and essential to follow all the recommendations included in the TSM checklist when implementing these thermographic measurements. And having covered these methodological aspects, I will now provide an overview of the main studies on food temperature in relation to physical activity and sport. One of the main applications that Felipe also talked about is this injury detection. Of course, the systematic review that all of us knows report good sensitivity and specificity when assessing these musculoskeletal injuries. And specifically in the foot, both in plantar and dorsal part of the foot, the asymmetries between both foot are typically around 0.33 degrees. These values are slightly lower than those reported in other regions of the body, which are around 0.5. But the authors emphasize here in the importance of ensuring that only the feet appear in the images, avoiding the inclusion of other body parts so that the analysis can focus specifically in this region. Here you have an example of an ankle sprain detection. In this case, the injury was in the recovery phase 2 weeks after it occurred. As we can observe, the temperature difference exceeds this recommendation of 0.3 degree threshold. But this technique has also been used to detect other conditions, including skin-related problems like ulcerations in diabetic patients, nerve-related conditions such as neuroischemia, and vascular alterations. It has also been seen that the revascularization process after an induced thermal stress is slower in diabetic patients than in healthy individuals, and some studies has also identified other type of injuries like stress fractures on runners or muscle-related conditions such as cramps, contractures, or contusions due to the inflammatory component these injuries have. Nevertheless, another line of research that we have explored with this technique is to try to relate biomechanical variables with food temperature. In the example that we can see in the screen, we attempt to determine whether the ankle inversion and eversion could be reflected in plantar temperature. However, we did not find a clear relationship with these angular biomechanical variables. We cannot relate ankle movement with the temperature of the soles of the foot, neither with just the heel or with the entire foot sole. Another application that we explored was to try to detect asymmetries in RAIN technique. In this case, we modify spatiotemporal parameters by adding a weight on one of the legs of our participants. And although these produced changes in running mechanics, these changes were not reflected in plantar foot temperature. Finally, and based on previous studies that found some relationship between plantar pressures and skin temperature, we try to understand if this correlation appeared, because we can think that regions in the foot sole with higher friction could lead to higher temperatures in these regions. But what we found here was that this correlation were not reflected with the skin temperature of the foot soles, but with the outer sole of the shoe. So we tried to find an explanation of what happened here. So the lack of correlation between biomechanical variables and the plantar skin temperature may be explained by this microclimate generated inside the shoe. This environment can lead to substantial increases in temperature, in some cases more than 10 degrees, from baseline to the post-exercise condition. As a result, the whole foot may reach a high and relative uniform temperature, making difficult to detect meaningful differences between regions or between both feet after this prolonged running. So, as we couldn't find this relationship between biomechanical variables and infrared thermography, we try to apply this technique to assess the impact of different sport equipment to foot temperature. In this case, particularly, we work with mainly foot orthoses or insoles and footwear. In this study, we analyzed the effect of custom-made insoles compared with prefabricated running insoles and the original insoles provided by the shoes. And also, although slightly differences appear in some areas, such as the forefoot or the midfoot, after running, these differences were very, very small, and the effect size were very low in all cases. So no substantial differences were observed between the different types of insoles. It's important to note that the participants of this study were healthy runners, so no major biomechanical changes were observed at the kinematics, nor angular or spatiotemporal level. Along with the same time, we analyzed generic prefabricated insoles compared with thermoformable insoles, which could be adapted to the shape of the foot with a standard microwave, and the results were similar of the previous study. No substantial differences in healthy runners for infrared thermography. However, one particular interesting finding was the difference in thermal behavior between men and women. Women started with lower plantar foot temperatures than men across most regions, and after a 30-minute run, their temperature increased, reaching values similar to those found in men. So this suggests that women may start with lower foot temperatures, and then could be like a thermal sealing effect inside of the shoe after this intense or prolonged exercise that all the participants in this study reached. To try to understand this microclimate inside the shoe, some other authors perform analysis related to breathability and insulation in relation with sweating and foot temperature. Some findings suggest that skin temperature does not play a major role in the perception of foot moisture by runners. For example, when they compare barefoot running with short running, higher sweating rates were observed in barefoot conditions, and this may indicate a phenomenon of moisture retention when footwear is used, which is called a hydromeiosis. Interestingly, the areas perceived as having the greatest discomfort and humidity did not always correspond to the areas with the highest sweating rate. For instance, although the heel or the dorsal part of the foot were the ones with the more elevated sweat productions, runners tended to perceive the toes and the heel as the most humid areas. So the authors suggest that footwear and sock design should focus not only on thermal properties, but also on the tactile interaction between these components and the foot. In fact, one study found that wearing socks during running did not produce major thermophysiological differences. However, running without socks increased thermal discomfort, moisture perception, and stickiness, reducing overall comfort in the participants. Here you have an example of isolating properties of different types of footwear, in which running footwear had better heat dissipation than mountain shoes after 10 minutes of running. And as I told you before, to finish my presentation, I will present what are the next perspectives or direction in footwear, in foot temperature assessment. In running, where the most studies have been conducting, it would be interesting to analyze the effect of advanced footwear technologies, such as carbon fiber plate shoes, on plantar temperature. The presence of this rigid element in the shoes, together with the instability reported with this type of footwear, and the increased demands on the metatarsophalangeal joint, could influence foot temperature. But in this case, I think it's probably better to assess this over short periods of time to avoid the influence of this moisture accumulation and the shoe microclimate, which may mask the acute effects of the carbon fiber plate. It would also be interesting to investigate footwear use in other sports with high impact, such as volleyball, badminton, or football, which involve different movement patterns like frequent jumping or changes of direction, which may affect also plantar thermoregulation. And also further research should focus on the detection and diagnosis of injuries or functional pathologies affecting the plantar surface. And in this regard, we are currently developing a study on hallux limitus, which is a condition affecting the first metatarsophalangeal joint, to explore whether thermography could contribute to its clinical assessment and help guide appropriate intervention in podiatric practice. This brings me to the end of my presentation. You can find more information about this topic in the chapter 14 of the book Application Infrared Thermography in Sport Science. You have a QR code on the screen, which will directly to the book. Once again, thank you, Jose, for inviting me to this seminar. I would like also to thank all the participants for your attention. I will be happy to answer all questions or discuss any comments that you have. And I will also like to take this opportunity to invite you to the next CAT conference, which will take place in Valencia, which was my town for 8 years. So hope to see you there in June 2027, and hopefully presenting some of the results from the future research line we have discussed today.